Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us again today. And I have got someone, her LinkedIn bio says this: in my free time, I pursue the passion of understanding psychology and philosophy while vacuuming Play-Doh from the rug. Now, listen, I have raised children. My son is, as you well know, is an adult. I understand completely finding Play-Doh in places you don't think you'll find Play-Doh, but it's okay. I have a beautiful, sweet lady joining me today on the Intentional Encourager podcast. You can find her on LinkedIn at Islan Monastery. Forgive me, I've already blown it. See, you can't trust your host. Islan Monastery, Munisteri, and her first name is spelled Islin, but you can find her right here, right now, no matter the pronunciation, on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Islan, how are you today?
I'm doing really good. Thanks for asking, Brian.
No worries. Let's start here. Everyone has dealt with COVID-19 in different ways and different, everybody's experience has been so different around this pandemic. Take me what through the last 15 months or so have been like for you, where you live out in Colorado. And I'll be there as we record this podcast. I'll be there in about 72 hours. I'll be in Colorado, and I've never been. But what's it been like for you and your family around the COVID-19 pandemic?
So we've been really lucky. At the start of the pandemic, I learned about homeschooling, and I learned that I cannot homeschool. And that was pretty good, because it was like 6 weeks of like having my son in my lap as we went to school together. Like his teacher would do lives, we would attend the lives together, and then we would do like an hour of homework or whatever project work she had us do, and then I was done, and then I would also be helping my daughter at the same time.
So you're like me. You're like the consummate lone wolf. It's like, hey, listen, just let me do my work. Let me do what I got to do. And now all of a sudden you've got kid in one hand and you're staring into a camera. You've got your daughter, and it's like, this was not the way this was designed to be. I mean, how did you get around those mental challenges in your own mind?
The mental challenges, well, something that was really interesting was that we basically set up a dining room table in our living room, and then one child sat on one end, and then the other child would sit on the other end, and the teachers could actually hear each other teaching. So that was funny, but the mental challenges part, I was like, luckily right now I'm on disability, so I was able to have the time to help them. But getting up at 9 a.m., like when at that time last year, I needed like 12 hours of sleep a night. So that was a big, because trying to get up was a huge challenge for me. And like usually I would drop them off at school, then take an hour nap, and do the rest of my day. But then I just kind of took away the nap and kind of compressed my sleep.
There is nothing wrong with nap time. Trust me, there is nothing wrong. I have found myself, where I'm talking to you from now in my office, I have found myself going, if I could just get 20 minutes, I'd be good. Or 30 minutes, I'd be good. There is nothing wrong with that. Listen, if it's good enough for preschoolers, if they interrupt their day flow to let them take a nap, why can't adults do it? I don't understand that.
Exactly. So I was napping, but man, my naps were like 60 to 90 minutes, but I recommend shorter naps now. But like, it was like the mental challenges of trying to get up on time. Like it was like having a job, man. Like my job was teaching my kids for 6 weeks. And that was like the toughest, like besides selling, which I think is another very tough job, But that was, I was just like, oh my God, we need to pay teachers like 6-figure salaries, and we need to like I don't know, somehow dole out tax income better. It was,
well, let me ask you, let me jump in here and take me through that, because again, every child, and we've heard the challenges that a lot of kids have had around the pandemic, where their learning has been affected, and some kids do very well in that. I mean, you can put them in any setting, they're going to do well. They just naturally get it. They're going to do what they have to do to perform and succeed and things like that. How was it for your kids? You mentioned just a minute ago, sitting across the table, you have a dining room table. One child is on one end with their class. The other child is on the other end with their class. Take me through, how do you feel like your kids handled their learning situation during the pandemic?
I really think it comes down to ages and stages, right? Like my son, who was 6 years old, like could not do anything on his own. Like I tried that with day one. Like he attended his live well, and then I asked him, well, what homework do you have, or what project work do you have? And then he was like, oh, nothing, Mom. And then we went on the video on Seesaw, like there's like a 10 or 20-minute video on Seesaw waiting for us. It's like, these are the activities you need to do. Let's do them together. And it was just like, oh shoot, man, like he couldn't, there was no way he was doing it on his own. But then my daughter, who was like 9, 10-ish, like she got through most of it on her own, and she only needed help with like certain questions, and she was done in like an hour. Like,
what do you think was the biggest thing that you learned from that? Because again, we in West Virginia, we face that here because now all of a sudden, literally within a weekend, I'm working from home. My son's taking college classes from home.
Yep.
And we have to now figure out, well, one, we have to figure out how we're going to share broadband internet.
Yes.
And two, we've got to figure out, okay, how are we going to divvy up the workspace? And so, yeah, we kind of face those same challenges. And I think what we learned, and I want to get into what you learned, but I think what we learned is we learned that we have our own needs and our own ways that we need to go about doing it. Because for my son's college classes, they now all of a sudden were just stopped, and then they were online going forward. We thought we had the technology set up, and it worked out great when you're here one day a week. It doesn't work so great when you're here 5 days a week, 6 days, 7 days. You're in that same space. What was the biggest lesson that you learned throughout the last year that you will carry forward going forward?
The biggest lesson, wow, that's a hard one. I'm a lot more patient than I thought I was with my kids. But I think the biggest lesson, I think, was the ability, like our ability to have high-speed internet in a rural area. Like we literally got enterprise grade internet like before the pandemic, because my husband and I work from home and we do video calls. So 15 megs a second is not going to cut it with like 3 people on video calls, right? So we were lucky, and we had high-speed internet, like 100 megabytes symmetric, like between since I don't know, 2019. So we already had the high-speed internet taken care of for us, and it was really lucky that we had it before the pandemic. I don't think we could have survived the pandemic without it.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I don't think people realized, everybody thought, okay, we're going to work from home. This is, and I know people that said, oh, it's great. It's awesome. And this and that. we live in West Virginia. We live in a technology challenged state where broadband internet access is not readily available. You know, and even my family and I, we had to make some changes in the middle of this thing to get faster and faster internet speeds. We're actually able to find a provider. When you think about that challenge, do you feel like you dodged a bullet? Do you feel like, oh, wow, we were prepared, even though we had no idea what was happening, we got prepared before we had to get prepared? Because some people got caught off guard.
Oh, yeah.
They were not prepared whatsoever.
Oh, yeah. We were like, because my husband and I, and like, I'm trying to get back to work, but like, and my mother-in-law and his mother, like, already all work from home. So, and we realized that like back in 2019, like in order for us to have a successful business working from home, we needed to have high-speed internet, or else there was no way we could have meetings, we could share slides, we could do what a normal business needs to do. So that's why, I mean, I'm just really glad, and I'm just really thankful that we were kind of prepared ahead of time. Like, we didn't even know no one knew there was a pandemic coming from China.
Yeah. No, 100%.
In 2019, it was just like, and then like cases started popping up, and all of a sudden it was like it just ramped up over a week. Like all of a sudden the WHO was like, we're in a pandemic, guys.
Well, Iselin, let me jump in here. Here's where I want to go here for just a second with you.
Yeah.
You guys decided in 2019 you were going to start working from home and doing your business, things like that. People who hadn't worked from home, it was a shock to their system.
Oh, yeah.
What's a piece of advice that you have for anybody still struggling with the work from home? Because there are people that even 14, 15 months later, you know, we hear a lot. And again, I make no light of mental health issues. There were times last year where I was like, I am so sick of these four walls, because I was used to being out and seeing customers out and things like that. I wanted to be out. I wanted to be out away from things and away from these four walls. But your business was home-based before everybody became home-based. So what's your biggest piece of advice for folks that are still struggling with, am I ever going to get back to working from normal? Or if their company says, hey, you know, this is going to be the way it is going forward. What's your piece of advice for folks on how to really make it work for them working from home?
Definitely. That's a good question. I would say you have to be self-aware. So you need to know, like, do you need to have meetings and like face-to-face contact with people each day to stay happy and healthy, right? Because there's some people I know that, like some engineers I know that, like my husband, you could put them in a sealed box, let them work for 8, 9, 12 hours a day, not see another person. They're perfectly happy. Like they're golden. But then like me, I know I'm more social. So I found that, you know, having 1 or 2 connection calls with new people I meet on LinkedIn a day really helps me. And then I can see if I can partnership with their business too. And so there's kind of like a business benefit there too. And you just have to really be self-aware. It's like, if you need those connection meetings, like if you need that like 1 or 2 hours of socialness each day or even more, like you need to put up those calls in your calendar, those Zoom meetings, so that you don't get depressed, right? Mm-hmm. You don't go to those bad mental health places because you're not connecting enough with other people. I forgot the source of this, but you know, we're super social animals. Like we need other people, the vast majority of us, to survive and to be happy and to be functioning, right? So, I mean, if you need like therapy, right? Like while you're like stuck at home, or it's triggering stuff that you never thought would ever come back up again, it's also perfectly fine to get telehealth and go get therapy too, and there's like no judgment, there's no stigma. I don't tell everyone I'm working with I'm getting therapy, right? But there's like, if you keep it private between you and your family, like there's usually no stigma because no one knows, and at the same time you're getting better. So like, just, I guess the first thing is be self-aware. Second thing is schedule those social meetings that you need. And the third thing is, if you still feel like you need help, it's okay to get a therapist over telehealth, because insurance for the most part is covering that right now. Like, or you can go private and go private pay. But I mean, just know what you need is, and being self-aware is the biggest part.
Yeah, I love that. Let's step aside and take a break. We come back. I want to talk to you about something I found in your LinkedIn bio that's really good about growth, cutting edge growth marketing. I think people, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. I want to talk to you about marketing and especially now marketing from a different place and a different perspective in the work from home environment. Talking to my guest, Iselin Monasteri, right here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Back in just a moment.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton here. I want to tell you about our sponsor, SEO National. SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. Now, what's that, you might say? Well, search engine optimization helps you show up higher on search engines in front of paying customers for words that you as a business owner can monetize. What a great concept. SEO National is owned by my good buddy Damon Burton, who's been a guest here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Not only has Damon and his team worked with businesses of all sizes, from e-commerce startups to NBA teams and Shark Tank featured businesses, but more importantly, Damon and his team are about transparency, trust, and providing lifetime value. So much so that he still has his first customers after opening SEO National 14 years ago. Let me give you some intentional encouragement and call Damon and his team today at 855-736-6285 or go to www.seonational.com and get a free quote.
Iselin, I want to talk about something I saw in your bio. Cutting edge growth marketing. Digital marketing strategies and tactics. I want you to define cutting edge growth marketing, because again, I think a lot of times people will say, I want to do this in marketing my business, or I want to do this in marketing myself. A lot of people talk about personal branding, and there's tons of ways to do that. What is cutting edge growth marketing to you? I'm curious about that. I really want to hone in for a few minutes on that.
Sure. So to me, growth marketing and cutting edge growth marketing means having an understanding of how your customer became a customer, having an understanding of the customer journey. So we're HubSpot Gold Solution Partners. So we usually put our clients on HubSpot because that gives them an understanding of how, say, a customer came in from an ad, how you converted them, how you did your sales process for the deal pipeline, and how they became a customer, and then have the customer success, like the ticketing pipelines, to kind of drive them through your onboarding process so that they're fully a customer and they're satisfied in the first 90 days, and you can keep on retaining them as a customer.
This is huge. And I want to jump in here because I cut my teeth for a lot of years in B2B. Okay. And so, we would in the food service industry where I started, I was there for 15 years, my first 15-year career. You would call on a customer. You would, and my sales process was about 4 weeks. From the time I started, I could get them to buy something in about 4 weeks. Seeing them a couple times a week, talking about strategies and what we could do to things like that, and getting them from that first interaction to actually getting product in their door. It's about 4 weeks. I figured it out. It's about 4 weeks. There was no let's check in with you in the first 90 days to see how everything's going. There was no, are you completely satisfied? How's that onboarding process look? For us, it was get a credit application, get it filled out, get a customer number set up, wait for that customer to say, okay, I'm going to place my first order. Then it was up to the salesperson to really be that frontline person and checking in and saying, hey, everything good? How you doing? When do you expect your next order? Things like that. What you're talking about is something that's radically different from a lot of old heads like me that did B2B a little bit differently. What do you see when a customer comes back to you and says, this, and this is what I liked about the process? What are you finding that customers are connecting with more and more in the sales process?
I'd say in the sales process, like they like custom proposals. They like having a solution that answers their specific problems. And I think like being really intentional about the discovery call and strategy and goals is really key to having a good sales conversation. You really need to get to the root of their problems in discovery, or else you don't give them a good proposal in the services industry.
I love that. And I'm jotting this down, getting to the root of the customer, because we talk about problem solving a lot. People would talk about, well, we've got to offer the right solutions. We've got to solve problems. We've got to do this and that. And I think everybody is so focused a lot of times on problem solving that we forget what connected a customer to us in the first place. Like, why did the customer choose us to start with?
Exactly.
So, yeah. Why did they? Because in Island, I've said this, and I'll say it again. I said this in my book, People Buy from People, and I'll say it again. People buy connection before ever making a transaction. And you don't know what that connecting rod was that got them to you in the first place. What's something that surprises you that customers say when you check in with them? Like, I didn't figure that would be an answer. Or a customer said, yeah, Island, this is why we chose to do business with company X because of this. It's like, oh, that's kind of a surprise.
I guess something that's surprising, like we do a lot of HubSpot onboarding. And I guess what's surprising for me is to hear that they're like some other people that onboard them, like they don't necessarily do all the technical setup in the background that you need to do to make it fully running. I feel like the onboarding process is really key. If you want to get a tool working right in the first place, you need to have that technical setup.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing too. And I love what you said about onboarding a customer, because I think people say to themselves, listen, we've done all the legwork up front. We've shown the customer value. We've given them the reason to buy. We've given them the opportunity to buy. And we kind of forget about the onboarding. I want to ask you this real quick, and we'll step aside and take another break. What is the biggest mistake that sales companies make in onboarding a customer correctly, or something that a sales company overlooks at times? It's absolutely critical to get that customer onboarded correctly.
They don't do enough discovery in the beginning. Like they don't know if the customer can, just throw some videos and a checklist at the customer and they're fine. They can onboard themselves and with like some, Q&A, like some calls from you, or do they need like a full, like white glove, like we need an agency or we need somebody to onboard us fully. Like it's not like we can do this ourselves, like in the same amount of time that we can have someone, an agency onboard us. I feel like that's missing in the sales conversation, like, because then you'll increase a lot of churn, especially as a software company. If you don't onboard customers properly, they'll like if it's a simple software solution, they'll use it once and they'll never use it again. Or if they have like a more expensive software solution, like when the renewal period comes, or if you're going month to month, they won't come back. And then as a sales representative, then or you got bigger issues on your plate, like clawback clauses. And like you sold them, but you didn't sell them all the way. Like,
exactly. And listen, I love what you said there. What does the customer really need? You know, because a lot of times you kind of say, I think I know what they need. I sold them what I thought they needed, or what we talked about they needed, but we really didn't get to what they really needed. And you said churn, which made me think of butter, and then I got hungry. So I'm sorry if my eyes glazed over a little bit. I apologize, because I thought churn and butter. I was like, oh no, this is not good in the middle of a podcast recording and to get hungry. Let's step aside and take a break. When we come back, I want to tell Islyn's powerful story. She has got a dynamic story of overcoming a huge challenge in her life, and I want to tell you about it. Come back with me. My guest, Islyn Monasteri, is my guest here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Back in just a moment. Hey, everybody, Brian Sexton. Want to tell you about my new book, People Buy From People, 10 Powerful People Lessons from the Ultimate People Person. My dad was one of the greatest connectors that I ever knew. And he shared with me 10 connecting principles that I have used throughout my 25-year sales and sales management, customer engagement, and leadership career that I'm passing along to you. If you want to be a stronger, deeper, and more powerful connector, you've got to pick up a copy of People Buy From People. There are concepts in there that you may not realize help make you a power connector. You can go to Amazon and pick it up, Kindle if you're an e-reader and you like to do it that way, or now available on Audible. And there's one other way you can get a copy of People Buy From People. You can get one from me and I'll sign it for you. You go to intentionalmediaandpublishing@gmail.com and send me an email, and I'll share with you the link on how you can get a signed copy. You can buy a signed copy directly from me. Again, People Buy From People. If you want to connect like never before, pick up your copy today of People Buy From People. And now let's get back to more great conversation here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Islyn, let's now tell your story. And that's, as you know, being on the Intentional Encourager podcast and listening, that's the meat of every podcast, is telling your story. So take me as far back as you want to go from point A to today and talk through your story and the challenges that you've overcome.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I was fairly successful in school growing up, and that's really all my parents expected of me. But there was a whole nother side of life that I did not know I needed to function well in, and that was the emotional and spiritual part of life that you don't get in school. And if you're lucky, like your parents give you what they had emotionally. And from my parents, I didn't get too much, to be honest. I mean, they gave me everything they had, but it wasn't, and it's unfortunate when you look back and you're like, well, it wasn't quite enough, but that's what therapy and having a supportive community is about. And so I think sometime in high school, I was bipolar, and it took about 10 years to diagnose that correctly. I was seeing psychiatrists and therapists all through those 10 years, like since I was 18. I was even seeing a high school counselor once a week. And no one really saw it until I had a massive breakdown when I was 28 up in Alaska. husband and I and the kids were living in Alaska, and we had au pairs, helping take care of the kids. And I just had, like, I went through spurts of suicidality before, but I never got to the point where I got to a point where I could not function. Like, I was suicidal. I had a really bad depressive episode. Yeah, in 2017, and then I spent 7 days at a psychiatric hospital.
Oh, wow. So I got to ask you this, and forgive me for jumping in here, but you go back to your high school days and you talk to a high school counselor, and being bipolar, and I had some family members that were bipolar. I had a cousin that passed away. He was bipolar. I understand that a little bit. You really needed a deeper level of help, but you were just trying to reach out to somebody, right? Is that, I'm trying to put myself into that moment and visualizing that moment. Did you talk to your high school guidance counselor or counselors because you really just needed to talk through that? What was your thinking even back then in trying to figure out what was going on with you?
I mean, things were not going well at home, even though I was doing really well at school. Like, I had a close relationship with my dad, but with my mom, I basically had no relationship since I was like 12. And I've started a relationship with her again now, right? But like, she had issues. I do not know what issues they were, but it caused her to yell at me intermittently, like with no cause, right? And that's a very traumatic childhood experience, especially if it happens over many years. It kind of doesn't destroy a soul, but it definitely does not help you grow up.
What do you think you would do if you had the chance to go back in time and talk to, you just happen to, you're at the age you are now,
mm-hmm.
and you could go back in time and you could parachute to your house growing up. You're 15, 16 years old then. What do you think you would say to then 15 or 16-year-old Islyn? How would you try to help her knowing what you know now?
I would probably gone on like bipolar meds sooner, right? I would have. What was interesting is that the help, like the therapist you get, fits the level of awareness where you are. So I wasn't very aware. So like the therapist can only help you as aware as you are at the level of consciousness you're at. And then through different teachers and through different therapists, right, you go to deeper and deeper levels of awareness of yourself. So I couldn't really parachute in and help myself because I just didn't have that level of awareness at that time. So even if I told myself I would have, you're bipolar, you need to get on meds, I probably would have shooed away and been like, no, I feel great. Like, why would I need to be on meds for it?
And now at 28, you let's fast forward back to what you were talking about just a minute ago. 28, you have a severe breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel it coming, or did it just kind of hit you like a heart attack? We've had people, and I'm thinking back to a conversation I had with a friend of mine, Justin Welsh, here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. And Justin, his moment ended up in the emergency room with an event. Like, just it was instant and sudden. Was yours the same way, very instant and sudden, or did you feel it coming on?
Oh, it was sudden, man. Like I remember finishing a report the month before, and I wasn't feeling very good. I was feeling very anxious. I was very anxious, and then like I was feeling suicidal, and then like my husband took me out. We had lunch, and then he took me to the psychiatric hospital or to the emergency room. And then that's when they transferred me to the psychiatric hospital from the emergency room. But I was catatonic. Like I was not, like I couldn't function. like I could clothe myself and I could go to sleep and eat food and stuff, but that was like I was like my husband and I decided to move out of Alaska after like the fact I was not getting better in 2 months. And we decided to move down to Colorado because we had family. And like he basically had to pack up the house with some friends, and I could not help him at all.
Do you think being able to dress yourself and feed yourself was just years of repetitive motion in doing
Pretty
those
much.
things day in and day out? Because, again, I talk about routines, and I talk about it in my new book that I'm writing. And it's, every morning's the same routine. Get up, make the bed, take a shower, eat breakfast. I mean, it's, there's not a lot that deviates from that. So you are basically just functioning on things you've always functioned in. Everything else was just kind of
gone.
Was gone. Yeah. I wanted to kind of pull a little more conversation because I think people are saying, well, how did you have the mental capacity? If nothing else, how did you have the mental capacity to feed yourself and clothe yourself and do all this other stuff? But it all just came, it was all just innate, right?
Yeah, like I could do the basics, but could I drive? Hell no. I could not drive. It could not work. Like I did not have the capability to work. They put me on a 6-month leave of absence, like with like FMLA and everything, and I could not get better in 6 months. Like there were other points in my 20s that like I took 6 weeks off from work and I got therapy, and then I could go back to work. That was okay. Like there was a couple of other times that's happened, but like the when I was 28, I could not. Like I was like not functional.
Take me to that. I mean to interrupt you, Iselin, but take me to that point where you had a breakthrough in your therapy, where you finally, because you just mentioned you would have therapy, you would get better, be able to go back and relapse, and then you mentioned not being able to drive or work for about 6 months. Take me through the breakthrough moment where you finally were able to get over the hump, so to speak, not get, but able to get over that hump.
Well, it's been 4 years, right? 4 or 5 years since I've been on disability. And in the middle, like I was manic when we were moving from Alaska to Colorado. Like we stayed up too late one night, or we got up in the middle of the night one night because there was a hailstorm coming. So we had to move the truck and the trailer to another location down the highway in Canada. And I think I was like raving like manic as we were driving down to Colorado. And then it wasn't until like I found a psychiatrist here in Colorado, and she put me on the right meds, that I was no longer manic. But it's been a while, and I was going to therapy like 3 times a week, like doing meds, like all of it. It's only been recently here that I've been finally like gained the self-awareness enough to know what my anxiety triggers were, and I'm still working on it now. Right? It's not like, oh yeah, I figured out my anxiety triggers, I'm done, I can go back to work. It's unfortunately not that simple. I still have issues driving long distance, just because of like ability to concentrate and focus. Right? That still hasn't completely come back. The critical thinking, right, still hasn't completely come back. And like I was a professional engineer in Alaska. Right, I had a license, like professional engineer in petroleum engineering, and I'm still not functioning at the level I was when I, like, the month before I lost my job. Like I was just like not, like I'm still not where I need to be.
Wow. Let me ask you this. as we wind our conversation to a close, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned from all that you've been through?
Wow. I mean, I think this applies to like anyone really, is that if you don't take care of your shit, your emotion. Oh no,
It's okay.
Oh no, now we have to put the little E on the podcast.
Yeah.
But if you don't take care of your stuff, your emotional stuff, your spiritual stuff that you have inside of you, whatever it may be, like it will come back, and it may take years, but it will come back to bite you. Like whether it's like a dysfunctional marriage or dysfunctional relationships or something is happening right now that you're not listening to, that the signs are very apparent that you need to go get help, but you're just not aware that you do need to go get help.
Yeah. Taking care of the things you need to take care of. And for some people, it's mental. Some people, it's physical. I remember for me, June 26, 2008, going to the doctor, and my doctor saying, me weighing 350 plus pounds, my doctor saying, if you don't get weight loss surgery, you're going to die. Mine was all physical. Yours was mental. And again, I love what you said there. Whether it's mental or physical, it's taking care of what you have to take care of, being able to take care of it. Islen, leave our audience today with your biggest piece of intentional encouragement.
I intentionally encourage you to go get help if you need help. You don't know if you necessarily do need help until that first therapy appointment, or until you decide to go for 3 months and see where it goes. But I encourage people, especially like now during the end of the pandemic, if you've been holding out, or if there's been something seriously bothering you, or you haven't been able to go to sleep at night, or if you're overweight, or if you're self-medicating with wine or with any other food, whatever you're self-medicating with, like go get the help. Because do you want to be dealing with the same issue 20 or 30 years from now when it's a lot worse and you might be like on the edge of death from it, or if you want to deal with it now?
Yeah, I love that. Go get help if you need help. And we encourage you that if you're listening to this podcast, you're going, Brian, Islen's right on the money. Go get help. Go get it taken care of. Islen, where can folks connect with you on social media? Where can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can also email me, Islen at THEIA-marketing.com. And yeah, you can, and if you connect with me on LinkedIn, you'll see my mobile number and everything. So there's lots of ways to connect with me if you want to get a hold of me.
Yeah, I love that. Islen, the website is theiamarketing.com. theiamarketing, or you could connect with Islen, Islin at theiamarketing.com. Islen, this has been such a pleasure. I've enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for your honesty and your transparency, and for joining us on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
Thanks, Brian.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And of course, the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through his word. If you're not subscribed to the Intentional Encourager podcast, hit the subscribe button wherever you get podcasts so you don't miss an exciting episode where you can get encouraged and stay encouraged. And remember, anyone, anywhere, at any time, any place can be an intentional encourager.